Hi, this is Lisa, and you are listening to I Love That Movie. This podcast is for movie lovers. It's not an unbiased opinion, it's not a straightforward review, it's just a couple people talking about a movie that they love. The format is each week I have a guest, and that guest and I discuss a movie that they love, something they're obsessed with, something they connect with. We'll talk about the plot, the director, and the actors, but we'll also talk about the personal connection my guest has with that movie. So if that sounds like something you want to listen to, keep listening. Hey, this is Lisa, and if you want, you can catch up with me on Twitter or X at ILTM Podcast, also on Instagram at I Love That Movie Podcast, and we have a Patreon. The show is always free, but if you want to join us on there, you can. That's at patreon.com/I Love That Movie. And that's where I talk about everything else that I'm watching, like Pluribus and Stranger Things and, everything that everyone's watching these days. So if you do sign up, you get a weekly bonus episode of my reviews of those types of things, and you support the show. But I do, and if you want to help new listeners find us, and I'd appreciate it if you do, please subscribe, please rate the show. But with that, I want to welcome a new guest on the podcast. I want to say hi, David.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. Can you introduce yourself to our audience a little bit?
So, my name is David Steele, and I have a YouTube channel. As you can see, it's called Real Talks with David Steele. I started it about a couple years ago. So I have a couple of original shows on there. One of them is my monthly show, Perfect Movies. And I understand that there's no movie that's, quote, perfect per se, but they're critically acclaimed movies. So I have movies on there such as The Dark Knight, The Social Network. I just did Top Gun Maverick this last month. And I have a whole list of other films I'm going to be doing for the rest of the year. I also have another show called Anatomy of a Movie, where I'll take a scene of a movie or an act, and I'll break it down. For example, I've done that. Heat. I've done Silence and Lambs. I've done the third act of Return of the Jedi. So I love films. I love movies. And so I am liking to actually not only talk about what's in front of the camera, but what's behind the camera too, about the business, how it's changed from, the theaters to streaming and everything in between.
That's amazing. Well, I'm really excited to have you on. If you're listening to this show for the very first time, basically the premise is my guest just picks a movie that they love and we talk about it. So, David, we kind of went back and forth a little bit before the holidays. So many Christmas movies are taken. So we kind of went back and forth a little bit. We decided to put it off to the new year, and that's why you're on today. And what movie did you choose to talk about?
I chose a movie that is personal to me, but I think it's also an underrated movie with a huge cast. And that's the 1997 movie Rounders.
Rounders. Okay. So I have to admit to you, this is my first time ever seeing this movie. Really enjoyed it. I agree with you. I think it's underrated, but tell me a little bit about your history with this film. Like, how did you first see it?
So I ended up seeing it with my mother. And we used to love to go to the movies. And so we picked out this movie together. And this movie is one of my favorite movies, and it really got me started playing poker. So I have been an off and on poker player for the last 25 years.
Wow.
And and this is the film that actually kicked it off for me. And once I saw this, I became really interested in it. And I said, "Oh, I've got to, And so, so this is, I watched it again last night for the upteen time. And, but I still love it.
Okay,
So,
well, I'm excited to talk about why, because there's some good and bad things to poker, I feel like, about this movie. But that's really cool. I like it when a film kind of kicks off a new passion. But with that being said, this is not a spoiler-free show, so we're going to talk all about the movie Rounders. So if you've never seen it before, I recommend pausing here, going and watching it, and coming back. I'm going to share a quick synopsis that I got from, quite honestly, Wikipedia, where I get a lot of them. But Mike McDermott is a poker addict who knows the game inside and out, but loses his money one night in a game to a Russian American gangster, Teddy KGB. Promising his partner Joe he'll give up, he meets up with his best friend Lester, Worm, Murphy, who just got out of prison and is owing a lot of money to the wrong kind of people. McDermott becomes his co-guarantor, and now there's only one way to raise the money. The pair have to get back into the game.
yep, that's it.
That's it in a
That's
nutshell.
it.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's kind
Uh,
of. I mean, I almost feel like it's a movie a little bit about addiction, right? Is that fair to say?
um, yeah, it could be.
It
It
could
could
be.
be.
It could be.
It could be.
Yeah.
So when we meet Mike in the very beginning,
Uh huh.
we don't know really how long he's been playing, right?
Right. That's
And
that's
so,
true.
we can see he's been playing a long time because of the amount of money he has, but we don't know how often he's been playing. We don't
That's true.
know, the stakes he's been playing. We don't know really any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so um, it could very well be about that addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that it's more of yeah, I think it's more of we're introduced to Mike. And so when
Yeah.
we're introduced to Mike, the first line, we know he's seasoned because the very first, voiceover we hear, and is, this movie has so many quotable lines to it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, for me, the very first line of the film, if you can't spot the sucker the first half an hour at the table, then you are the sucker. Then, it's basically saying, but yeah, I could see where you could come across and say it was about addiction.
I mean, I think I like it when people have different perspectives on a movie. So I don't think that it was a necessarily a dark movie either. But yeah, I'm interested to hear your take too. I have usually I share like a couple of quick facts. Really, the only one that I saw that I think resonated with me, jumped out at me, was that Matt Damon and Edward Norton played a $10,000 buy-in Texas Hold'em championship event in at the 1998 World Series of Poker in Las Vegas. So I guess after the movie came out.
Yeah, and they've been playing and to be clear, they've been playing every year since.
Really? Okay, so they
Yes.
were also very
Oh,
influenced by
yes.
this movie.
Yes.
I
They
like
they
that.
um so the way this got introduced is that the writers, okay, were part of they ended up finding out about the underground games in New York. And that's where this takes place. And so they were fascinated by it. And they said, well, we should do
Oh.
a movie about this. And so they ended up writing a movie about this. And so at the time, Matt Damon was, he was not as big as he was today. I mean, he had just coming off doing the Rainmaker and everything else. And so Miramax at the time is a small company, and they said, "Well, let's see who's out there that would want to read this." And they sent it out, and Damon was one of the people they sent it out to, and they're like, "Yeah, sure." So yeah, um, and Norton, he actually was right in the midst of his little run with American History X, and
Mm,
he just got an Academy Award nomination for Primal
wow.
Fear. So it's like, okay, well, if we can get these two guys together, you know, so
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier it's a stacked cast. So, Matt Damon, like you said early on in his career, Edward Norton, really big players, but then also John Malkovich.
Yeah, Malkovich was fantastic in this, and so I mean, I think that he made people kid, oh, he was over the top and everything else. Yeah, but it, Malkovich is one of the best actors of this last generation, without
Agreed.
question.
And I
Um,
really like seeing John Turturro too. I mean, I love that show. I mean, I like him as a character actor. He's great. But most recently saw him in Severance, which I absolutely love. So I was like, oh, it's John Turturro. I got
yeah,
excited seeing him in this too.
nice. Yeah, John Turturro, he adds a different flavor
Mm-hmm.
to the whole perspective.
I
Um,
agree.
yeah, and so yeah, so what were your thoughts about it? Like, I know
Mm.
like, what were you, how much do you know about it? And what were your thoughts about it after you saw it? I'm just curious.
I didn't know much about this film before I saw it, but I felt watching it, and why I said what I said at the beginning was this is how I saw it. To me, it seemed like Matt Damon, obviously he'd gotten into some kind of trouble around, he lost a lot of money, and that really impacted his relationship. It also impacted his trajectory, right? Like, and so his girlfriend is very much, to me, she reminds me of like a partner that's like, loves her partner, but really wants him to get on the kind of straight and narrow, right? And so, but the second that he picks up Edward Norton's character Worm, I feel like Edward Norton, to me, he's in prison, right? Presumably related to these gambling addiction. And yet, even though he's in prison, and that should give him a different perspective on life, like maybe he should, in theory, think, okay, that, the stakes are a little too high. I'm going to lose it all. Instead, even in it, the second he gets out of prison, he's almost like in denial. Like he's kind of like, listen to all these cool things I learned in there. I can't wait to get back out there. And to me, I'm thinking, what? Like, he went to prison. And at the time, I think Matt Damon's kind of like, hey, you went to prison. Like, that's not the best trajectory for you either. But he pulls him back in little by little,
Yeah,
and then, it ends up kind of destroying his life throughout the movie. But then at the end, when he wins, it's so intoxicating and it's so successful that he continues. And like, I thought that was and that's why I said it felt a little bit like it's about addiction, because it's like, it doesn't matter that it ends his relationship, his career, everything. He ends up in like an empty house, like literally. But at the same time, he wins, and so
yeah,
at the end, it's like, I think that's what I liked about it, was that it's not depressing though. Like, I feel
yeah,
like there's a different way to tell this story where at the end you're like, oh, that's so sad, like at the end of Requiem for a Dream, you're not like, oh, drugs are fun, like it's
you're
that's
right,
a
right, right,
different
right, right.
story. But I didn't. What I liked about this movie is, even though I kind of feel that way about it, you can very much see why at the end he's like, I should keep doing this, because I mean, quite frankly, he's really good at it. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense that it would still inspire others, yourself included, and the actors themselves to like play poker.
Yeah, I think that for me, it was more of um, a brotherhood type of thing. I think it
Hmm.
was, how far are you willing to go for somebody? What are
Aw.
you willing to do for somebody?
Yeah.
And are you willing to vouch for somebody even after they've proven they are, let's say, not the best people in the world? How
Hmm.
far are you going to, can you redeem yourself?
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
because at the beginning of the film, we see, you're right, we see Mike lose it all,
Yeah.
and he has to, you know, even in the first 15 or 20 minutes of the film, when he's taking Worm to that to Barbara's place, and he stops and he turns around and he's like, "Well, how did you know I would come back?" And Worm says, "Well, who's your favorite character?" "Clint Eastwood, the outlaw Josie Wales, who always doubles back for a friend." And
Oh,
so I
yeah.
think it's really about friendship. How far are you willing to go? And then what happens when you hit rock bottom? And then what are you willing to do to get back to the place you were? And so, even Mike says in that little one of the things I really enjoyed about this film, and I do enjoy about this film,
Mm-hmm.
is the voiceover from Matt Damon.
Yeah.
Because we're getting his thoughts. Yes, we're getting the dialogue with the different characters, but we're getting his thoughts.
Mm.
And so that being said, it's one of those things where you can understand a person, or
Mm-hmm.
to a certain extent. Um, and so even when so yeah, it the poker is just a vehicle
Mm.
to the actual theme of the film, I feel.
Yeah. I could
And
see that.
you take out the poker and you plug in something else, and it's still about friendship and loyalty and everything else.
I
And so,
also. Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I also think that Worm is not. He doesn't have it. Like I think Matt Damon's character throughout the movie, because of like Worm's passion about poker, it's like he kind of knows in the beginning, like, yes, I lost, but I could come back and I could win because I'm really smart and I'm capable and I'm really good at this. Like, this is kind of what I'm meant to do. But then he's kind of convinced not to do it. And then through saving Worm, he's kind of like, this is my destiny. Like, I was supposed to do this. And I think Worm is like overly confident the whole movie, convinced that if he just gets one more shot, he could pull them out. But really, I don't think he has it the way the Matt Damon character does. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you had the juxtaposition of Worm, who always you always have Worm looking at somebody as a mark, always. And there were countless times throughout the film where he says, there's that one scene where he's playing and he goes to pull him out. He's like, "Listen, if you get listed as a mechanic, you'll never get a game anywhere in New York." And he's like, "But that's me. I see a mark and I take him down." And
Mm.
that's his perspective. Where Mike, and even they have that conversation. Well, that's what I like about you. You see this and you see the big picture type of thing. So you have that juxtaposition. Um, and it's interesting you brought up Destiny, because I think there's the scene for me, and I wrote this down. I took notes throughout the whole thing. So the scene for me is where Mike goes to apologize to the professor,
Mm-hmm.
and he sits down. He's like, and there was small talk at first, and then he's like, "Can I tell you a story?" And the professor proceeds to tell him about him, being a rabbi and how he couldn't be a rabbi and everything else. And he basically says, we can't run from who we are.
Mm.
And Mike says, well, if you had to make the same choices all over again, would you make them? And he said, what choice?
Oh.
And that's powerful,
Yeah.
because at the same time, each one of us has a destiny. Whether you're a spiritual person, religious, everything else, every single person has a destiny. We don't know what the end of it is. Would you make the same choice? He says, what choice?
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things where he was absolute. And, there are decisions everybody makes. And the fact that he can say that without any hesitation or question, and at that point, that's what really puts Mike on the path to go help him.
Yeah.
Because he was still in the relationship with Joe, but it was rocky. And Joe was somebody who she understood, but she didn't understand.
I think she just saw him as someone who was an addict. I don't think she
Right.
saw anything else about it. She just saw that as sad, and she wanted him to go to school and to, be on the right path basically. But, I think he never really wanted that. He kind of just pretended to because he wanted to be with her and because she stuck by him through what happened, but it just was pretty ill-fated.
Yeah. Yeah. And so at that point, um, once she leaves, really Act Two, and I wrote this down, really begins around the 52-minute mark when they go to Atlantic City. But it's, you know, it's that to me is one of the most, as I said, is one of the most powerful scenes in the whole film because it really talks about, you know, destiny and who we are as people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I think that Teddy KGB was a perfect villain too. I
Yeah.
mean, just for the simple fact of, so as you know, doing, studying films and watching films, there's only 3 or 4 types of um, villains or
Mm-hmm.
enemies, if you will. Man versus nature, man versus themselves, man versus, an alien, or, So you have man versus man, okay, and man versus himself. And Mike was really trying to struggle to
Mm-hmm.
try and find out who he is. And once he found out who he is, he really embraced it. So, um, yeah, I mean, I, I just, I guess this came out, and this film was really instrumental for not only, the time, because this was only made for a couple $1 million back
Mm.
then. Even though it had a huge cast, there was still, I think it was made for like $4.5 million. And it didn't, gross that much at the box office, and it was never going to, but it's a, it's a film that resonates even today.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I found myself so pulled in, and that's as someone that's not. I mean, I don't really play poker, I don't really gamble or anything like that, but it had vague echoes of like the Fight Club era of Ed Norton,
hmm,
I think that's pretty, which is probably my favorite era of him. And you could see a little bit of like that character forming. It's like very of its time, I think. And I don't know, like me and my husband were watching it and we were thinking, I feel like you don't see a lot of movies like this in theaters anymore. And I don't know, it was just like a character
no,
study
no,
and I
no, you
enjoyed
don't.
it. Mm-hmm.
You don't. This is the type of film, this could never be made today. Never. Because, and because it just wouldn't be a, I wouldn't say popular film, but I mean, there have been other poker films to be made, like The Gambler, like the one with Oscar Isaac a couple of years
Oh
ago.
yeah, I liked that one
Um,
actually. But
yeah,
it's dark, and that
yeah,
is
no, it
like
is dark.
the
It is
darker
very
version
dark.
of this movie.
But that
Yeah.
being said, it's not that attraction, right? Poker movies just don't, studios just don't say, "Oh, I'm going to make $100 million poker movie." You know what I mean? So, um,
Right.
but yeah,
It has to have an
this
angle now. It has to be like
exactly.
depressing, Oscar bait, something, but this isn't that. This is more just like a movie about, poker being treated like a sport. And it's like I said, I think it's a character study. I think it's a drama, but I don't know if you agree with this, but to me it feels closer to like Usual Suspects than it feels closer to like a dark, sad movie. Like
Yes, no, you're right.
it's got fun in it. And I feel like that element is like you just don't see a lot anymore. I think The movie Nora kind of felt that way a little bit, where it's like it's got some dark subject matter, but it's fun. But you just don't see that kind of film often.
Yeah. Um, so there, you know, the game itself has evolved so much over the years, and so what happens there? Like, it's funny because the whole thing about Mike beating Johnny Chan, that's what really, I won't say really put Johnny Chan on the map, but anybody who you think of Johnny Chan, if you never knew about him, okay, um, that's what this movie really put him on the map, because the World Series of Poker at the time was not what it is today. It's just not. Um, ESPN, it's as that video showed, covered it, but it's not like it's a 7-day event, and it's I mean the buy-in's still the same, but it's not the same coverage and all of that. Um, but what I'm getting at is the culmination, like Mike beating Johnny Chan for that one hand to prove to himself that he can do this. And that's why we find out at the end, the third act, that's why he made the run of KGBs, right? And so I feel like he had to lose Joe in order to. So when you lose something, you have to pick up something. I think he had to lose Joe in order to really gain not only his confidence, but his skill level. And
Yeah.
know he can leave on his own and be happy with himself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not to say he wasn't happy with, but you could see the deterioration. And the reason why he was so hesitant in talking to her is because she didn't understand. So if you don't understand, that's that scene where they're walking out of the bar and she's like, I found this gangster role, you know, so that's why I left this morning. And he says, well, I couldn't lose. And she says, well, you can lose. It's a simple premise of she couldn't he couldn't make her understand. This is what it is. And no matter how much he tried to put it in layman terms, he couldn't understand. He couldn't do that. And I think that, you know, eventually she said, "Hey, look, I'm done." And
Yeah.
um he didn't want that. I mean, as he, not as he did such a poor job in moot court, and then comes out and they're talking about the relationship and says, "Hey, is that it?" And and that was it. I mean, let me ask you this: do you think Mike felt sorry that he lost her? Because most guys would be fighting harder.
I think he did, but it was too obvious that he couldn't give it up, and I think he was too distracted by and in love with the game. And he just thought, if that's what I got to do, that's what I
Yeah,
got
no,
to
yeah,
do.
I would
Yeah.
agree with that.
And I think it was the
He
right call for both of them, honestly. Like, if I was her, I'd probably leave too, to be
yeah.
honest. I mean, just because, look, he's hanging out with somebody that went to prison, right? I mean, it's, and she's studying the law. Like, I mean, they're just not compatible at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to understand. So one thing that we find out early on is when he has to take the car to go pick him up.
Hmm.
They were childhood friends. Okay, and we find out later on that um,
Right.
that was
Yeah.
actually interesting too. We the whole backstory of Worm, okay, was almost like a 5-minute voiceover. Okay, and that's how we're introduced to him even before he walks out the door, right?
Right.
So the minute they embrace, it's like, okay, you already know the character.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so let me ask you this: did you pick up on the motif of the film.
The motif of the film.
Okay, so the Ace of Spades.
Mm-hmm.
It was featured 4 times.
Oh, okay.
So the first time was on his wrist,
Mm-hmm.
on when he was in the car when they get picked up. The second time was when he was shuffling the cards and shows Mike.
Mm.
The third time was when they're in New Jersey, and the guy shows the Ace of Spades. And the fourth time was the last card that KGB puts down.
No, I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, yeah, and
That's pretty cool.
yeah. And did you know how? I mean, obviously, Mike says it, which I didn't. My mom picked up on. I didn't the first time I saw it was the Oreos, right?
No. Well, I remember he talked about the Oreos a couple of times.
Right.
But I
So
guess I didn't understand their meaning.
right. So in the very beginning, when he has it, and then he puts it back, okay, he didn't have a hand. Or he had a hand rather, okay? And then when, at the end, he does it differently, and that's what's called a quote tell,
Yeah.
okay? So if somebody
Yeah, like
a nervous
to see.
tick, or they put
Right.
their hand over their mouth, or something, and every time they have that, or a good hand, they will do that.
Yeah, he just needed to observe him more in
Right,
order to be able to.
So
it warranted him playing him several times to be able to
yeah,
pick up on his behavior. And that's another thing, too. We kind of talked about how Worm has a different objective. He's also just a hustler. Like, Worm wants to. Cheating people is part of the end goal for him. Not just to win, but to really, be a hustler.
right.
But
right.
for Matt Damon, it's like a science, it's like an art, it's a sport.
Well, and you're absolutely right. And going back to the whole thing, Mike likes to play it straight up, which means no cheating.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, to your point, okay, Worm is all about he sees a mark and he takes him down, and he uses the mechanic grip, and that's something that poker players will do and whatever else, and it's frowned upon. And so he doesn't care what he has to do to win. That's all he wants to do. Whereas Mike will do it the correct way. So, yeah, I mean, you have that different dynamic too. There's a lot of polar opposites there. And, even it comes, back full circle when, at the end of the film, when Mike is going back to New York to explain to Grandma, hey, look, here's what happened. And then he goes to the professor and says, listen, and then that wraps around to what, the story they were telling. And so that's why he was able to, help him out with the $10,000. So, I enjoy the film just because of all of the different elements. And, it's fascinating because, so when you look at this, poker is a lot of things. Poker is, yes, about playing the man, but it's also about probabilities and everything else. And like the hand that Mike gets to win to beat KGB at a full table of 9 players, that's one. If you were to deal out 100 hands 100 times, right, you would be getting that 1 out of 125 times. Or, with those 3 cards coming out, it would be about 0.5% doing that. Now, I'm a numbers guy, so I can, tell you that. Even a heads up with only 2 players, it's even that much more difficult. Now, obviously, it's a movie, and I understand that. So, but yeah, it's I actually I actually interviewed a former World Series of Poker
Oh, cool.
winner. His name's Chad Holloway. He actually works for Poker News,
Mm-hmm.
and so they were one thing they poker players and people have really wanted to know is will there ever be a sequel? That's like the burning question. Um, uh, Chad was telling me a couple years ago that they they really want to try and make a sequel, but
Oh,
it's just a
wow.
matter about scheduling and because Edward Norton said he'd come back, Matt Damon said he'd come back. They want to get the writers back, you know. So it's just a matter of hopefully that happens. But and then after that, you know, they so that was one of the things that really made the game really take off. And then of
Mm-hmm.
course a couple of years later you had with this is his real last name, guys. Um a man named Chris Moneymaker winning the World Series of Poker main event. That's his real
Wow.
last name, I kid you not. And so he was an amateur. And the story behind him is it's pretty crazy. He was down to like his last couple $100. You want to talk about degenerate gamblers? This guy was a degenerate gambler. He was down to like his last $300. Bought
Oh,
into what's known
wow.
as a satellite. So a satellite is like a little smaller tournament to get you into the bigger tournament. So he wins that, and then he goes in and he wins the whole thing. I think he ended up winning like $3.5 million at the time. But every year after that, the field doubled. So it went from 597 to like 1100 and 1100 to 2200. And that was what was known as a quote moneymaker effect. And this last year, um, there were close to, I think, 10,000 people to play in that one tournament because that's like the big one that everybody likes to play into. But yeah,
Wow.
um, yeah. So it's for me, it's about friendship. As I
Mm-hmm.
said, friendship, loyalty, brotherhood, and how far are you willing to go for somebody,
Oh, okay. That's a good perspective.
and destiny. You
Yeah.
know what? I mean that to me. I mean, you look at a couple of different things, but when he says we can't run from who we are,
Mm-hmm.
and then he asks him, "Would you make the same choices?" And then he's like, "What choice?"
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
powerful.
I agree. We haven't talked a lot about the director, John Dahl. Have you watched any of his other movies?
So he used to John Dahl actually used to direct a television. He did about 20, 15 or 20 episodes of a Showtime series called Dexter. So he was more of
Oh, wow.
a television guy. I mean, he's done feature films, but he was more on the television side.
Okay.
And then he came over and he did this. I don't know if it was in between a break of that show or whatever, but yeah. So, but he did Dexter for quite a few episodes.
I did not
Um,
know that.
yeah. So, but yeah, and this is one of those movies that is just I know I keep saying it. It's rewatchable.
Mm-hmm. I
It
could definitely
really
see that. I
it's
feel
a
like if I saw it again, I'd see more of those things that you talked about. But, I watched all of it. My husband sat down through like half of it.
yeah
And because he was like, oh, I'm kind of doing other things. Don't wait for me. But then he kind of sat down and it ended and he just went, wow, I really liked that. I didn't expect
yeah
it. And some of it is, I don't know if you feel this way. I think some of it's the story. For me, a lot of it is Matt Damon and Edward Norton's like performance.
hmm
Like
oh
they're
yes
like if you replace them, I don't know that it would pull me in the same way. I think it's my connection to an appreciation of them. And then this is just a role that seems like it was really made for the two of them.
yeah no you're right.
Do you know what their relationship was like on set? Like you said they still play. So do they play together?
Um I don't think the only time they really play together is in the main event, like together. So they don't. I mean, I'm sure they still play on like whatever projects they're on.
Okay.
Um, but when they are, I know when the series comes around, they do play. That's the only like the big point they'll play.
Yeah.
Um, but together, yeah. I mean, I'm sure.
Okay. I only ask that because, as you know, Edward Norton has a little bit of a reputation.
Yeah.
So it's kind of unique that, like when I was looking at the facts about this film, usually when he's in a movie, there's a bunch of, I hate to say, but people saying that he's difficult, right? I didn't see any of that when I read about this, so I thought that was unique, and I thought maybe it's because they have a deeper friendship.
Yeah, I mean that is a definite possibility,
Yeah.
and I think there's also going back to the cast, I think it's because of Malkovich,
Mm-hmm.
and you know just kind of it was still a teaching moment because
Yeah,
don't forget both those guys were pretty young,
that's true. So
and
different dynamic.
so
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I think that if they maybe tried to get out of line or whatever, and he's like, you know what? If you really want to have longevity in this business, you kind of want to keep yourself on a leash type of thing.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
so, but yeah, it's because that's one thing you hear a lot about in any film is when they're talking about, you know, I got to meet this person or I got to work with this person. They told me this, that, or the other, and they learn from them. And so that could be one reason.
Yeah,
But it is interesting to me that if you look at those two actors, Damon's been the more prominent of them.
for sure. Absolutely. And that even in some ways feels like a parallel to the film, right? Like I feel like there's that part where Worm's girlfriend is kind of looking more at Matt Damon. Matt Damon in the movie I would say is a more like classically Hollywood handsome than Edward Norton, and I feel like that there's intentional casting with that. And then that's kind of the trajectory of their careers is different as well.
No, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting because you would think after the Academy Award nomination, he would get more. I'm talking about Norton. You would think he would get more publicized roles. But after
Hmm.
that little run and what you were talking about, like Fight Club, Rounders, American History X, Primal Fear, you never really heard from him again.
Yeah, I mean, he
Well,
did
I'm not
some cool
again. I shouldn't say that. He
projects.
he
Death to
worked.
Smoochie
He
is cool.
worked.
Yeah,
But if you look at Damon, what he did, I mean, we could both list the number of films that he did.
for sure.
And, it's like, whoa, he was in this and he was in that and he was in the other. And he's gone on to do, I mean, The Martian and, you know, Interstellar. And I mean, he's in The Odyssey this coming summer and, all
Right.
these
Yeah.
films. And it's like, it's crazy, you know? So, um, yeah. Um, I just, I don't know. But for me, I think, in all honesty, this is more personal. This is a more personal
Mm.
film, and yes, it kicked off my love for poker and everything else, but it's more personal. It's in. I always look at going to the movies like it's a memory
Yeah.
because the first time you see a movie with somebody, you remember what movie you saw, you remember when you saw it, you remember where you saw it, and you remember what you did.
Hmm.
And that was this, right?
Oh,
My mom
yeah.
and I used to go to movies all the time, or
Oh,
when we
that's
could.
great.
And so she's the one that introduced me to this one. She's the one who introduced me to Silence of the Lambs. She's in the one that
Wow.
all of these
She
films.
had great taste.
Yeah. Well, Silence of the Lambs was a little different, but that's for a different show. But
Yeah.
but it's that's the thing, the memories. And
Yeah.
so this was the memory I had
So you could
of
kind of
going to
return
see.
to it and relive it.
Yeah.
I think that's so true. I talked about recently I saw anniversary of Back to the Future with my dad, and that's something that I've grown up with that movie. It has been a big part of my life at like pivotal points, and it's special to go back and revisit it.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's absolutely because the and the more iconic. So the way I look at movies, and I have some of these on the channel, is I look at them in two ways. I can look at them in the right now, and then I look at them and I do retrospectives on the channel.
Mm,
So what I'll do is I'll take a film like any film that's turning it anywhere between 5 to 40. Okay, so if it came out 5 years ago, okay, or 40 years ago, anywhere in between, and I look at the time. Okay, take Heat for last year. Okay, take Heat for last year. Okay, that movie just turned 30. Can't
wow.
believe that, by the way.
Yeah,
But
I know.
nonetheless, that is one of the most iconic films of the last 30 years.
Hmm.
And at the time, that movie didn't get the love that it should have. I mean, but you look back on it now, that coffee shop, I mean, everything about that film, as a matter of fact, I did that for quote perfect movies. Okay. Because of the shootout and the coffee shop scene and the dichotomy of that. And that's I've broken that down. My point is this: we see films now, but when you look back, even 5 and 10 and 20 years later, it's a completely different light.
Yep.
It's a completely different viewpoint. And when you see a film, that's like just take Oppenheimer for example. The film came out a couple years ago.
Hmm.
That movie 10 years from now is going to be viewed as one of the best movies of all time because of not because it won 7 awards, but because of the filmmaking aspects of it.
Hmm. Okay.
And I think that in itself is important.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those things where looking back and looking on the here and now is important, but looking
Hmm.
back in the 10, 20 years or however long, or Back to the Future, like you were talking about, okay,
Yeah.
that movie's 40 years old. That
Hmm.
movie couldn't be made today. It
No.
just couldn't
It's
because
lightning in a bottle too.
it really is. It
Yeah.
really, really is. I mean, you had Michael J. Fox, that was at the time huge because of um, Family Ties.
Hmm.
You have Christopher Lloyd, of course, who did Taxi and other
Hmm.
shows.
Yeah.
You had it had all of those elements that you'd want. It had the sci-fi, it had the comedic,
Hmm.
there were dramatic points to it, there were fun points to it, and that's really trying to you said it perfectly right there, lightning in a bottle. To
Yeah.
capture all of those things in one movie and be able to do it well, and just the way it ended to set up the sequel. Robert Zemeckis hit a home run with that,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I totally understand what you're talking about. With memories and everything else.
Yeah. No, I love that aspect of movies. I think they end up being pretty deep, for people that really love film. There's a serious connection under the layer of appreciation for like the artistic aspect. Is there anything else about this movie that we haven't talked about yet, like a favorite
I
scene we haven't mentioned or anything like
Oh
that?
wow, favorite scene.
We could be
I
here all day, right?
think yeah, I think wow, I think it has to be the bar scene, the one that
Hmm.
they're having that exchange because it, it's deep. So if a movie for me, if it could, it look when we go to movies and see movies, first and foremost they're entertainment. But if they can make you think and they can make you really have critical thought, it's done its job. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be depressing either,
No.
right? And that's the thing. That's what
It's unique
that
about it,
scene,
for sure. Yeah.
that's what that scene did. Because it can touch every single person who watches that can say, and the light bulb goes on. Oh, yeah. Okay. And so I think that's probably my favorite scene of the film. Did you have a favorite scene?
Hmm. Hmm. I liked every scene that John Turturro was in. I liked his dynamic and the things that he said to Matt Damon.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
he, even in the very beginning, in one of the voiceovers, Joey Knish was in. He's actually I mean, I don't know if his name is that, but Joey Knish is a person. I don't know if they changed the name around for the theatrical thing, but
Hmm.
it gives you a different viewpoint because rounders, okay, a rounder is a person who plays for a job. I
Okay.
mean, we
I was
think
going
of
to ask you
profession.
what that meant, actually.
Yeah,
Somebody
no.
asked me
So
last night. I was
that
talking about this
actually
at dinner,
is,
and they were like,
yeah,
"Oh, what does rounders mean?" And I went, "Well, I'll find out tomorrow."
yeah. So a rounder is actually somebody who plays for a job.
Okay.
So instead of going down to your local supermarket and working 9 to 5 and 40 hours a week, their job is to go to the poker table and to make money, to pay their rent, to
Mm.
put food on the table,
And
to
that's who
keep the
he
heat on,
was. Yeah.
to do all of those things. And that's, you know, I mean, look, we only know that he has a truck, but he
Yeah.
has other small little businesses because he was successful enough to do that. But
And he's
that's what it
humble,
is.
I think.
Exactly.
Yeah. He
And
respects the game on a different level than Worm does. Worm is like hustler, flashy, confident. John Turturro's like serious
well,
about the
that's the
game.
scene in the third act when Mike gets banged up and he comes back and he goes to the spa and he's like, hey. And so, you know, Kanish comes out and he's like, oh, you look like you went one round with Norton. What happened? And he's asking him for money. And so Mike tells him, hey, listen, it wasn't a bad beat. I just got outplayed. I got outplayed that hand. And he's like, no, I know you have no doubt. And that's when he tells him about the Johnny Chan. But he says, listen, you see all the angles, you never have the stones to play them. He's like, stones? My kids eat. I pay rent. I have alimony to pay. I mean, to the point. And that's when Mike says, listen, you know, he's like, I know you're good enough to sit at that table. And he's like, well, I never told anybody this. About 6, 7 months ago, I go into the Taj and, you know, Johnny Chan walks in and he sits 300, 600. He's like, oh, everybody puts a beat on him, high rollers. So you know what I did? I sat down. He's like, well, you need about 50 or 60,000 to sit down in that game. He's like, I had 6, but I had to know. He's like, what'd you do? He's like, I folded, mostly, and then I made a score. And Kanish is thinking wired aces of kings, so that's a pocket pair, or that's 2 of the same card. He's like, wired aces of kings. He's like, rags, which is like nothing. And he's like, he raised, and then and that's when he was talking about the hand. He's like, I re-raised. And then he says, well, I just, he came right back over the top of me. And so, and he's like, he tried to bully me like I'm some Taurus. And so I came back over the top of him. And so he made him fold. And that was the moment he says, I know I can do this. I sat with the best of the world and I won. And
Mm.
that was the moment that Mike said, I can do this. So when we see at
Yeah.
the end of the film and he makes that run and he gets that money back and then he leaves for Vegas, that's when he knows he can do it because he
Yeah.
has the confidence in everything else. And so that's, getting back to the whole Kanish thing, the rounder is somebody who plays to pay their bills. And that's what Kanish had always been. We don't know. We know he'd been doing it a long time, but
Hmm.
they never gave him a number type of thing. But yeah, and so hence that's why the movie's called Rounders. As a matter of fact, it's funny, as you have seen when we've been talking, my ex handle is wannabe rounder.
That's great.
So wannabe a rounder. I actually, um, in many years ago, and I played. I actually quit my job, and I put a little money together, and I um I actually tried to play limit poker because I was
Wow.
making as much money as, I mean, you have to understand, I was making, this is when I was 825 was the going wage back then. So 25, 30 years ago. But nonetheless, I made the decision of quitting my job and going in because I used to live in Boston. Okay. So I was like a 90 an hour ride from Foxwoods on the bus. And I used to go down there a couple times a week and play poker. And I had a limit in my head and said, okay, here's how much I'm going to win today. And for months, I was actually making as much as I was working 40 hours a week.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, minus the transportation costs and food costs, but I was making the same amount of money. And so it's hard. Now, the thing about it is, you don't have a boss. You don't have anybody to tell you when to go to work. You don't have a boss, but you have to produce all the time. And that's why I played Limit because I was too scared of getting in one hand and losing the whole thing. And I didn't do it the right way. But nonetheless, that's what they do. Rounders play and they grind it out.
Hmm.
And so they they enjoy it too. That's the other thing that should be made mention. They don't play. Yes, they play for money, but they play because they love the game.
Yeah.
So otherwise, they go out and get a job.
Sure.
So they play long enough and they play well enough because they love the game. So yeah, I love this movie, and I think it's one of my top 2 or 3 movies. And every scene for me is just. I mean, I've said this to you. I've seen it upteen times. I sat
Yeah.
down and watched it again for the first time last night, and everything was just so good
Yeah.
about it. It didn't feel, and that's the other thing too. Did you think when you watched it, did it go by quickly for you?
It did. I think the pacing of the film is really good. I never got bored. It's not like a movie where some of the scenes I'm like, oh, this is a throwaway scene. Like, it has good pacing.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. It's only about 90 minutes, and it goes by
Yeah.
really, really, really fast. I mean, it's
And
not like it's super like cut. You
yeah,
know what I mean? So
it
it goes
doesn't
by
feel too
super
short.
fast. But
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that this could not be made. As I said, this could not be made today. But more importantly, if you try to, this couldn't be made into a 2-hour feature film. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You couldn't put another 30 minutes onto this, and it would feel long. If that makes sense.
I agree. And sometimes these days, I feel like that happens to movies a lot, where it's like we want them to be longer and longer. And I don't know. I think there's something to a good edit, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I even hesitated to say pacing because sometimes people will over criticize pacing, in my opinion. And I'll be like, I don't know, you just don't like a slow burn, you know? But
No. Yeah.
I think in this movie, in this case, it's the right amount of time. And
Yeah.
aren't a lot of like sports films kind of short too? Or am I making that up? Maybe I'm
No,
thinking
no,
of,
no,
yeah.
no. I mean, it really. I think it depends on the movie. I
Yeah.
mean,
Depends on the genre.
I mean, yeah, really, it depends on the film. It depends on the. I mean, Moneyball was probably around 2 hours. I don't have the TRT in front of me, but it was probably about 2 hours. Um, any given Sunday, maybe 2 hours and 20 minutes. Now you got to understand that was 25 years ago. I mean, Moneyball was 10 years ago. So I think that in those kind of things, we've seen the total running time increase because maybe they want, well, I mean, depending on the story, but also to because they want to give them more for their money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, this was the perfect running time, and yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's just an underrated movie. I really
Okay.
do,
If you
and
yeah.
yeah,
If you had to sum it up like in a sentence or two, like I know we've been talking about all the great things about this movie, but like to summarize it, what really keeps you coming back?
the message, the message of um, what you're willing to do for somebody, the message of loyalty, the message of destiny, and for anybody that hasn't discovered the game and they say, well, what is this Texas Hold'em? And in the first 5 minutes, it's explained. And I think that's important because if you don't know what you're watching, then you're not going to be interested in it. And it's so well
Mm-hmm.
done that I think that it's just it's a good starting point, and then you just go from there. And
Yeah.
as you said, the pacing is perfect, and then we see the end result. So
Yeah. Well, if you had to pitch this to someone that hasn't seen it before, what would you say? Like, how do you pull somebody in?
um, I would say big cast. I would say fast running time. I would say um, most popular game. I mean, obviously, sports, everything else. Poker is at an all-time high right now. It's on every channel you can think of. Okay, um, and whether it's live or I mean, ESPN runs all of its clips, and we have a whole poker channel now, Poker Go, and it's at its peak right now, and it's been that way for years. And I would say that if you want to go watch something that's dramatic, that's funny, that's all of these things, this is a good introduction to what it could be. And then if you want to start, this is how you start. So,
Nice. Love it. Well, thank you so much for introducing me to this movie, and it's been a pleasure talking about it. Um, is there anything else you wanted to? I know you plugged at the beginning. Is there anything else that you wanted to plug on the way out?
right now I am in the midst of doing a top 25 film scenes of all time. Now, I say this in the very beginning that these, how can you put together a top 25 scenes list? There is no official list. This is just my personal list. On this list, I have, and I've done such films as, the Get Out scenes. I've done, Silence of the Lambs. Number 22 is going to be actually the coffee shop scene from Heat. And that just tells you how strong this is. I have scenes from a ton of great movies, Mystic River and Star Wars and all these movies. And so that's my big focus right now for the channel. Um, I'm I'm still up in the air of what I want to do for the perfect movies. I think I have an idea, but I mean, we're right in the middle of January. I have a whole list, so I just have to pick one out. But stay
Hmm.
tuned for the perfect movies, monthly perfect movies. Stay tuned for the top 25 film scenes. and when I can put together the anatomy of a movie.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on, David. I hope to have you
Thank
back
you
soon.
very much for having me on. I appreciate it.